So you're adding some accessories to your vehicle, maybe some off-road lights or some on-road lights that use more juice, maybe some side lights or some backup lights and a rear fog, maybe an auxiliary cooling fan or some air locker solenoids. Well, if you don't want to see yourself on the evening news for jacking up everyone's rush hour or burning down the forest, you'd better protect your vehicle's electrical system. I'll show you a simple way to add multiple protected circuits safely and relatively easily. I'm going to show you how to go from this to this. First, let's quickly go over just a few basics. What's a relay? Why do I need one? This is a pretty typical 12-volt automotive mini relay. You've got 5 terminals on here. Sometimes there's only 4, you're missing this middle one. This terminal goes to fuse power from your battery. This would be from your switch, this would go to ground, and then this one would go to whatever accessory you're running. Your fogs, whatever kind of lights you got on, your fan, whatever. So why do you need a relay? Well, let's say you add a 20 amp switch to your dashboard and then a couple of 10 amp lights. Well, that'd probably work. Get your battery going to the fuse going to the switch going to the lights. Well, that's not bright enough. You decide to add 2 more 10 amp lights. And now you've got 40 amps getting drawn out of that little switch in your dashboard that's going to heat up, pop a fuse, you put a bigger fuse in, you end up burning your switch up and melting your dashboard down and start a fire. Here's where the relay comes in. We take 12 volt power from your battery to the fuse, just a 5 amp fuse, up to the switch. From the switch, it comes down to this terminal of the relay. When you give this power, and it grounds against here, it connects this terminal to this terminal. So we take power from the battery, go to a 20 amp fuse, from the 20 amp fuse to this terminal, from this terminal to your accessory. So you get power from the battery to the fuse, turn the switch on, gives power here, grounds against here, takes power from the battery through the fuse to this terminal, and gives it to this one. Now your lights have power directly from the battery, not going through your dashboard, and it's fused. Now you want to add a couple more lights, but you don't want any more switches in your dashboard. Just add another relay. Power from the switch to this terminal, power from the battery, 20 amp fuse, to the relay, to the accessory. This one's grounded. These relays consume such little power that even off of just a 5 amp fuse going into your dashboard, you can operate multiple relays off of one little switch. I know, it's not pretty, but it works. Well, let's make it pretty. Got a fuse block and 2 relay blocks. This is what they come with. All the little connectors, tabs, everything you need to make your own little relay center. Let's start with the fuse block. Pull the metal tab back, cap comes off, and you can see there's 12 positions here and 4 positions here. Total of 16 fuses, whatever size you want to put in there. Now for the relay block. Cap comes off the same way. You'll see that there's 4 slots for 4 relays. So here it is. 1 16-position fuse block and 2 4-position relay blocks, giving us 1 fuse for each relay and 1 fuse for each switch for the relay. Well, suppose I'm not using a switch for the relay. For example, I have the H4 headlight conversion in my Jeep and I had to upgrade to heavier gauge wiring run off a relay. Well, I used my factory headlight wiring as the switch, giving me extra fuse block slots. So, for example, one of them I used for a 12 volt accessory outlet. I'll do another video when I redo my headlight wiring fuse block up under the hood, clean it up a little bit. But for this one, I'm gonna have a switch for each relay. All right, now let's get these things all linked together. All these little feet pop off of there. So first, let's pull off this bottom cover. And then you can see there's these little tabs that need to get pried out. And this foot slides off. And then on the other side, it gets pried out from the outside and comes off the other way. The relay blocks are the same way, and there's these little yellow tabs in there that help lock the terminals in. You can still get around them with the screwdriver though. Okay, so now with all the feet removed, you can slip them all together. But here's the question. Do you want to slip it together like this, where you've got relay fuses? Do you want the fuses on the side, on this side? Or do you want them over here? Or do you want a relay block on either side of the fuse block? And which way do you want these fuses oriented? I guess that wouldn't really matter because you can do it this way. But figure it out, slip them together. When you slide them together, you'll see that they snap in using the same snaps that those outer feet snapped on, so they're a solid unit now. Now it's just attach the feet to the outside. And you've got your base. Trace a rough outline onto a piece of cardboard. It'll work as a template later. Next, you want to make a legend of where you're putting what fuse for what relay. It's really easy to forget, and it'll really help out to have a nice little printout sheet, laminated, whatever, underneath the cover of this sucker, in the glove box, whatever, somewhere down the road. So this will work for now until I figure out exactly what switch is controlling what relay, but for now, relay 1 gets this fuse, and the switch that controls relay 1 gets this fuse. I'll start off by putting fused power to relay number 1. So I'm going to put the spade terminal with the locking barb on the end of the wire. I'm using 12 gauge wire, so pretty much no matter what accessory I ended up running on there, it'll be heavy enough to carry that amperage through. These aren't the right crimps for it, but you basically just fold them over onto it and then pinch it down. Then you want to fold these guys over the insulator so that it doesn't rip loose later on. So I'm working on relay number 1, which is this one. But if you look at the orientation of the terminals, this is opposite from the way I described it earlier, where the power from the battery is up top. So when we flip it over, pry out the plastic locking tab just a little bit, but you'll see power from the battery, power from the switch, ground, and accessory. So when we insert it, and I put it with the locking tab facing this way, slip it in, and it'll lock in place. Now we want to be able to stretch it over to power for relay number 1, which is going to be this one. So I'm going to run it to this side right here. These are the terminals for the fuse block side. Just trim one off. I'm going to leave extra length on this wire. And this one basically attaches the same way as the last. Got it crimped on there, going to fuse terminal number 1. I'm going to have this little locking barb facing towards the relay, and it will just snap into place. Now just continue on down the line, giving power to each one of these relays from the fuses that you designated for them. Well, there's 1 through 4. And here's the next 4 of them done. Gotta be really careful. Pay attention to which ones you're crimping. I lost one of these. I won't give you so many of them. So this is the power distribution block I'm going to use. It has this nice clear plastic cover on there. You just squeeze these yellow tabs together, pop it off. See, it's labeled for positive. Use that for all your fuses, and then negative for all your relays. Here's how I'm going to set it up. These are all the fuses. This is the positive side. So I'm going to set it up about like this so that it's underneath the plate that the fuse block relay panel mounts to, and that any excess from the bolts coming down through these tabs has a little recess here to sit into. And it'll make my wires shorter between the positive and the fuses. Alright, same thing for fuse number 1, only this locking tab Faces the opposite direction now. Snaps in. I'm going to leave a fair amount of excess on this one as well. Alright, got these ones all stabbed in there. Now I'm going to move on to the ground for all the relays. Get them over to the negative side of the block. Now that I'm setting up the negative side, I see that it's going to be a pain. With the positives going in here, I'm going to have to stretch the negatives all the way up and over the top of that plate and then back in. So I think what I'm going to do instead is rotate this sideways, bring all the positives around to the one side and all the negatives around to the other side. I'm going to start with relay number 8, and remember, these are in there backwards from what we laid out earlier. So this is the terminal I'm going for. Locking barb facing the fuses, slip it in, wiggle it on down till it snaps in. Make sure I've got enough length out of this thing to get over here onto the negative, and it looks fine. Now just finish the rest of them. Alright, got all the grounds and the positives all laid out for the relays. Now I'm going to move on to the switches. This is stereo amplifier wire. It's 4 pair of speaker wire, color coded, one with a stripe, one without, and then there's a blue amp activation wire in there as well. It's 18 gauge, it's perfect for this low amp application. So I've got it stripped back pretty far, and you can see, especially on the white one, how there's a stripe on one and the other one's plain. That makes it really easy to identify which is going into the switch and which is going out. I'm going to use the plain wire coming from the fuse to the switch, and then the black wire coming from the switch to the relay. I've stripped it back this far because I want to use this blue wire as the ground wire for the backlighting on the switch. These other wires going to the fuses and the relays will just get trimmed to length. Alright, so I've got them all stripped back to length. I've got the solid colors with the terminals for the fuses and the striped colors with the terminals for the relays. I'm going to go in the order of green, white, gray, purple, and it has to do with the length that I cut these things to reach the relays. I'm going to insert the green solid wire with the locking tab facing the relays into that slot for switch number 1. Just push it down into place and snap it in and continue on. Now with these 4 snapped into the fuse slots, I need to route the other end of them over to the relays that they correspond with. But I want to weave them through the wires in a way that they're not going to get tangled and it'll still look clean. I'm going to start with the green one first over here on relay number 1, locking barb facing this way, slip it down in there, and snap it in. Right now the octopus is starting to take shape. Alright, so this loom will work for 4 switches. There are 7 pair of wire, and I'm going to need another one of these looms for switches 5 through 8. But I already have one of these installed in the vehicle, routed through the ceiling and down the side wall and everything, so I'm going to leave those blank for now. Alright, now for the accessory loom. This is 7-strand trailer wire. It's fairly heavy gauge. It'll work fine for getting power from the relays to the accessories. Alright, well, I've got them stripped back and terminals added, so I'm going to get started. I'm going to start with the green one and the white one up here in number 1 and number 2, just because they already are green and white up there. I'm going to take the same route as the switch loom and use the locking barb facing down. Lock it in, and then this can lock down in place. Alright, so I've got it wired in for switches 1 through 4 and 5 through 7. Number 8, I don't have the accessory run to it yet, but I'll do something on the inside of the cab. I've only got 5 positions that I need for the roof, leaving me 2 spares for whatever else I want to add on at some point. Now I just need to route power to the fuse for the switches, so I just stripped back some more of the loom, and I'm going to do it color coded as well. So for the fuse for switch number 1, I'm going to face the locking barb this way and lock it into place. Alright, so I've got all these in place. Now I'm just going to lock them in with this plastic strip. Alright, now to mount this, I picked up this 6x8 sheet of aluminum at Ace Hardware today. First thing I want to do is trace out where everything's going to fit on the sheet. So getting started, I brought this out to my vehicle and put it in place where it's going to go. It's going to barely overlap the cover on my ARB compressor in the trunk, so I've got that traced out. Next, you need to see where the bolt holes are going to go for your mounting system. I'm using these L-shaped brackets. 2 on this side, 1 over here, and I'm going to put a little bracket attached to the cover on that ARB compressor. So grab that template from earlier, set it down on there, and figure out if any of your mounting brackets can use the same holes. I'm going to figure out how to get this one to work by drilling a hole in here first and then going off of that for the rest of the holes. Looks good. Got it traced out. Time to go drill some more holes. Looks good. This is what the layout's going to look like on the bottom side. This is a continuous duty solenoid. Let me explain that. So we've got the battery and we need to get power to the distribution block. So we add a breaker. Now we have fused power going to the distribution block, and if we ever want to shut the power off, we can quickly disconnect it. Here's the problem. I don't want my fuses and relays to have power when I shut the vehicle off. So we add a continuous duty solenoid. Here's how it works. You take power from the circuit breaker or fuse to this terminal, and then it comes out from this terminal over to your distribution block. This lug here goes to your switch, and this lug here goes to ground. So for my switch, I like to use a 12-volt accessory outlet that only comes on with the key. So when the key is turned off, this solenoid is de-energized, disconnecting this lug from this lug, and your fuses and relays in your new relay center have no power when you shut your vehicle off. You want to put this circuit breaker as close to the battery as possible. Anything downstream from it has any problems, it'll trip this breaker. Or if you want to work on anything, replace this solenoid if it ever goes bad. Anything goes wrong in your system, you want to add a wire, take a wire out, push a button, and there's no more power. So make sure everything's going to fit, mark the holes, and drill them. All right, looking good. I got them attached to the bottom loosely, and that's what it'll look like on the top. I think I'll mount the breaker to the top right about here. All right, that looks good. Just got to drill the holes for the other 2 brackets. All right, looking good. Now I need to make some room for the octopus to fit through the plate. A hole this size will work just fine. A skill saw blade slices through this aluminum like butter, or you can take a large hole saw like for a dryer vent and saw through it. It'll leave you rounded corners, but it's still large enough hole. I did this hack job with a Sawzall, drilled a few holes, got the saw started, but it'll be fine. That's not too bad. So I got the distribution block and the solenoid mounted on, but when I went to mount the circuit breaker, these holes needed to get punched through the mounting bracket for the solenoid, so I just continued on through with a drill bit. With this block bolted in place, it's going to be hard to connect the harness that's already in the vehicle to these final connectors and the relays that they go to. So I'm going to make a quick connect harness. I'm going to plug this into the fuse block now and then put quick disconnect connectors onto these wires. All right, got them all stabbed in there. Now I'm going to lock them down. All right, got it all bolted down. I just need to trim these to length, hook the grounds to the ground, get the positives all trimmed to length, and hook them up to the positive side using some ring terminals. All right, got all the wires woven into place. Now I need to start hooking up the solenoid. Let's start with the ground. Go from here to here. All right, looks good. And now I'm going to connect the load stud of the solenoid to the positive stud of the distribution block. Okay, looks good. Now I'm going to connect the battery side or incoming power side of the solenoid to the auxiliary or load side of the circuit breaker. Looking at where the battery stud is on the solenoid and the auxiliary stud or load stud on the circuit breaker, it makes sense to turn that circuit breaker around 180 degrees. Okay, got it turned around and the cable installed. That's just about it for the wiring. These 4 quick connectors get hooked onto the other loom that's already in there, and this will go onto the 9th blue wire as a ground. This stud here needs to get hooked onto 12-volt power. When the key is on, this gets power, which energizes the whole system. The negative stud needs to get hooked directly to the battery with a ground cable. And finally, the positive side the battery side of the circuit breaker needs to get hooked directly to the battery. Now for the fun part, installing the relays. So I'm going to do 1 through 8 on the relays, plugging them all in. And now 20 amp fuses for all of the relays, 1 through 8. Now 5 amp fuses for all of the switches. That looks good, and if you look closely you'll see that there's a little tab on the inside of the lip here. That needs to line up with this notch on the inside of the cover. These things are kind of a bear to get on there when they're new, but they will go on. Most of what makes it so difficult for these to go on is that the relays sit pretty tall in their slots. The fuse one will be a lot easier to put on. There's the notch. Oh, not too shabby. Let's go install it. Well, I've got it all wired in. It's all plugged into the other loom. Everything is good to go. The only thing I have yet to do is hook this up to any 12 volt coming from the ignition when the key is on, and I'm good to go. All right, well there it is, all powered up and good to go. When I put power to it from that ignition wire, you can hear that solenoid engage. I'll post another video when I redo my headlight wire harness and fuse block up under the hood. But for now, I hope this helps you out. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comment area. Thanks for watching.